Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing a really fun Python programming project. We are going to be sorting your downloads folder using a Python script, which actually isn't super difficult. There's a lot of really cool basic knowledge that you can gain from doing this, but what's really fun about this project is if you want to make it harder, and if you want to add more functionality, you absolutely can. There's like limitless possibilities with this. So with that being said, there are a couple prerequisites that you will need to have set up before you can get started on this. So the first thing is you need to have Python installed on your system. That should be pretty self-explanatory. And then also you need to have a text editor or IDE to actually write Python in. So in my case, I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can use something else like Atom or Sublime Text if you like paying for that subscription, which I'm pretty sure no one actually has an official version of Sublime Text. Anyways, the last thing you'll need to know is just some pretty basic Python syntax. It's not super difficult. Python's a really easy language to learn. But knowing some basic syntax would be really helpful in this case. In today's tutorial, we're going to really be zeroing in on Python lists and loops. Those are two really big concepts in Python and in programming in general that's really useful to know, and so this project really helps solidify those concepts in your head. So with that being said, let's get started. First thing we're going to need for this project is some way to interact with our file system, and that's going to be through importing import OS and shuttle. So in Python there's two modules called OS and shuttle, and these are how you kind of interact with your file system and your operating system. We're going to need those to be able to move files, rename files, do stuff like that. Next, what we're going to need is, let's think here, we're going to need some way to organize. We're going to need to organize these files. So what I'm doing is, let's see, my downloads, I've made folders called zip, exes, office files, PDF, image, audio, and video. So we're going to say create destination folders. Alright, so we have our destination folders set up. These are where we're going to be putting files. Next, in the actual Python script, we're going to need to, what are the steps going to be for this? So we're going to need to scan our downloads folder. So scan downloads. We're going to need to pick out the files that we want to sort, / move into destination folders, right? And then one important thing to know here is with your downloads folder, I've got a lot of pretty random file types. Let's see here. I have jar files. Which I don't really care about sorting jar files. I don't really download them that often. I'm more concerned about these primary file types. So we're going to need to check matching files. We'll say that. Check matching files that we want to sort. So only files that match a specific type. Specifically the types outlined in these destination folders. So we aren't going to be sorting jar files, we aren't going to be sorting really random file types. We're just going to be doing the main primary ones. And in today's video, I'm only going to do exes and PDF just for the sake of time. So that's kind of our basic outline, if you would, just kind of a general idea of what sort of implementation we want to have here. So well, let's think about one more thing. How are we going to move multiple files at once? So that's a really big part. We don't want to run this script 50 billion times for each file. We want it to collect all of the files and then move them all at once into their specific folder. So we're going to make use of Python lists, which, if you are familiar with other programming languages, sometimes they're called arrays. Pretty much the same concept here. So Python lists is what we're working with. So we're actually going to add all files of types we want to sort to a file array that will then be moved. So that's a very important distinction. We don't want to just add every single file in our downloads folder. We only want to move files of our specific type. So with that being said, let's jump into Visual Studio Code. Alrighty, so I am in Visual Studio Code now, and I have actually made us move to the specific folder that I'm going to be working out of. So this Python file sorter project, that's the folder we're in. It's just on my desktop right now. So first thing we're going to do is just create a new file. So we're going to call this main.py. So this is our main file we're going to be working out of. Great naming convention, if I do say so myself. The first thing that our list is talking about is importing OS and shuttle. So we're going to say import OS and import shuttle. Those are two very important imports for this project. So we have that out of the way. Next up is creating our destination folder. So if you haven't done so already, go to your downloads, new folder, and call it, I don't know, PDF or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to get rid of that now because I already have a PDF files folder. But we're going to, we want to grab these folders and we want them to be able to be referenced later on in our code. So I'm going to assign these folders to a variable. We're going to call this variable we're going to name it destination folders. And it's going to be a Python dictionary. So with Python dictionaries, really simple, you just have a key. So this is your key, and then this is your value. And then if you want to print, you would say destination folders, and then you would put in the key, and then you would get the value. So you'll see we have printed out value here. So we're going to do this to be able to reference our file folders. So I've actually, oh, well, I guess I had it copy pasted, but not anymore. So we're going to actually have to just write this out. So we'll say PDF file, we'll say PDF folder, and then let me grab the path for that. Downloads, PDF, properties, it's in my downloads. So boom, boom. I will copy that in. So what we're going to do is with Python and strings, that backslash character, you have to escape it because it's also used for things like /n, which is new line for strings. So whenever you have a file path, you need to add double backticks. So not backticks, backslashes, whatever you want to call it. And then downloads, and then this is finally going to be called PDF. Right? That's what the folder's called. Yes, PDF. So let's do the same thing for exes. So exes and then exe folder. Alright, so now we have established our Python dictionary that contains our destination folders. So at this point in the code, we're going to create a class which is going to take methods and parameters. So this class is going to be called sort type. It's going to represent every type of file that we actually want to sort. So we're going to have an instance for PDF and exes, and then we're going to take in two parameters, file type, so the file type to be sorted, and then where we want those files to end up going, so the destination folder for those. So let's actually start building the methods for this class. So let me just go over classes really quickly. This will be super brief. It's kind of like objects in JavaScript, like object literal syntax. Honestly, it's very similar. A class is a main object, and we can have properties. We can give it variables, so we can say is PDF, and we can say false. And then if we want to reference that, we'll create a new instance of the class. Why is it? Oh, I have a space. Okay. There, what we're going to do, if we want to create a new instance of this, we'll say exes is equal to sort type, and then we can pass in the file type will be .exe, and then the destination will be destination folders, exe folder. And then the cool part here is if we want to reference is PDF, we can say print exes dot is PDF, and then you'll see this returns false. But the same thing applies here. Is another really cool thing we can do is we can create functions or methods. So we can say def is the class method keyword there, so we'll say print stuff will be the name here. Then we'll just get rid of that. We don't need this doc string. And we'll say print stuff, we'll just say print hey there. And now I can also say exes dot print stuff, and then you'll see at the bottom here we say hey there. So classes are just a great way to organize your data, kind of combine everything together. We can combine methods, we can combine variables, and then we can even pass input. So if we want to say print, let's say we want to print the file type, so we can say self dot file type. Now it'll spit out exe.exe at us, which is really cool as well. So there's a lot of versatility in classes, and they're a really big building block for Python. So that's classes in a nutshell. But let's actually jump in here and start building methods that will actually apply to our program. The two main methods we're going to use to make this program work is going to be these two right here. So one called build array and then one called move files. So build array essentially is going to grab all the files in our downloads and compare them and say number one does the file match our self.file type? Because remember, we've referenced self.fileType down here. We've specified we want to look for only exe files. So does it match our file type? And then if so, if it does, add it to file array. Right? So, and then in move files, we're essentially just going to move all of the filtered files in file array. So file array has already been filtered. It's only going to be exe files because that's what we do in build array. So let's start off with build array. We need to have a place to pull our files from. So we're going to actually do this through this line up here. It's called, we're going to use a function of OS called list directory. And essentially if I print this out, you will see, let's go back up here. You will see that it prints out all of our files. Every single file that's in my downloads folder is printed out right here. That's what this does. So essentially we're going to need to look through all of them and compare each one to see if it's an exe file. So what we can do is we can say for file, so for every file inside of the downloads files, we're going to compare it. So we're going to compare the file extension, so files are composed of names and then extensions. We're going to compare its extension to the specified file type right here. So it's really cool because OS also has another utility that allows us to split the names from the extensions of our files. So if we say we're going to create a variable, it's going to kind of be like a transition variable, if you will, and we're going to call it file parts, and we're going to set it equal to os.path.split text. So they technically it's supposed to have two T's, but they took out one of the T's to make it sound better, I guess. I don't know. So essentially this is going to split the name from the extension, so we need to specify a source. In this case it's going to be C. It's going to be our downloads folder, so C users, my username, and then downloads. So we need to specify the downloads folder. So let's grab that, not exes, and downloads, right? And then we say plus file. Add those two in there. So if we print this out, print file parts, you will see if we just print out the first part, so this returns a list, a tuple, I guess, of two things, so the name and the extension. So if we say file parts 0, we're referencing the name, and then if we say 1, we're referencing the extension. So let's go ahead and run this. I never called the function, so that's fun. So we're going to say self.buildArray and call the function there. And you'll see it lists off all of the file extensions. And then if we do 0, it'll list off all of the names. Pretty useful stuff, right? So in the end, we're comparing the extensions. So we need to say if, this is an if statement. So we say if the file parts 1, referencing the extension, is equal to our self.file type, right? Because that's what we specified down here. So we're comparing these two values, so this value to that value. If it is equal to the file type, then we want to add it to our file array, right? So we'll say self.fileArray.append, and then we'll append our file. Notice how I'm not saying file parts, because then we're not referencing the entirety of the file. We're just referencing either the first part of the name without the extension or just the extension. So we don't want to do file parts, we want to add the actual file. Alright, in this case, let's see if this works. So let's go ahead and print off. Let's go ahead and print self.fileArray. Now what you'll see is it's going to print off all of my exe files, and you'll see it's done just that. So that's the first method that we have, and it's grabbing all of the files from our downloads folder that match the specified file type. Alright, so now we have all of these files, but now we need to actually move them into the specific folder. We're going to do this through this method right here, move files. Move files is awesome because it's going to be super quick and super simple. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to say we want to reference every single file in file array, because right, file array has been filled with our exe files. So we're going to say for every file inside of file array, self.fileArray, for every single file in self.fileArray, we're going to say shuttle, which is we're referencing this import up here. We say shuttle.move, right? Now we need to specify our source. So it takes two parameters, a source and a destination. So our source is going to be this, right? So, whoops, that's an extra guy there. Alright, so there's our source. And now we need to specify a destination, right? So our destination is just going to be self.destination, because that's where we've specified. If you'll notice, if you trace this back, you'll say, okay, we specified our destination here because sort type takes two parameters, our file type and destination. So here's our file type, here's our destination, and it references destination folders, the exe folder, which at the end points to this value. So it's the exact same thing as just copy pasting this and putting it in right here. But that's not what we're doing. So we want this to be dynamic. So we're going to say self.destination so that the user can specify it. Now we have our two functions, but we need to kind of connect them, because right now build array is separate from move files. So if I were to call move files, if I were to say self.moveFiles, if I were to call it right now, it wouldn't work because we haven't called build array. So the best way to do this is just to call build array inside of move files. So we'll say self.buildArray. Now we're running all of this code inside of this code, and then we finally add this on the end of it. At this point, the main implementation is pretty much done. So let's try and run this. Let's see if this works. So fingers crossed. Boom. All right. It listed off all of our exe files, and I don't know if you notice, but our exes now has all of these files in here. And I didn't show you that they weren't in there originally. I could be playing a trick on you. So I will show you again. If we rerun this script, now, boom, you'll see I had placed them back in downloads, but now they're back in exe. Our script works. This is awesome. This is exactly what we want. And so now let's see if we can do it with more than just one file type. So we'll do exes, and then we'll do PDF files. And we'll say .pdf, and this will be a PDF folder. Let's make sure, did I move it? Yeah, I didn't move it back out. So now if we move these back out, you will see something cool happen, and there's going to be a little problem, but I'll show you how to fix this problem. So if we run this, you'll see we get an error. No such file directory as this one, blah, blah, blah. And that's because, if you notice, file array is now, it didn't take the original exes out of the first instance. So we call sort type once here, which automatically calls move files, which automatically calls build array. And then at build array, we say, okay, add all these files to our array. But we never say clear the array. We never clear it. So we run it once and it gets populated, but then we run it again and it just adds more to the already populated array. It doesn't clear it and then say, okay, we want to do just PDF files. So in the end, we had PDF files and exe files, which is not what we want. So we need to actually clear the array after we're done with it with a specific file type. So what we can do is we can say, it's a really easy fix, we say self.file array.clear. Alright, so now I believe it did move our exe files. Whoops, that's not what we want. It did move our exe files, but we want to do PDF and exe at the same time. So now that we clear the array, when we're done, we should have things go off without a hitch. And you'll see, boom. Yeah, okay, so let me make this print statement a little bit clearer. We'll say we will add a fancy file type, type type, and we'll say plus self.file type plus plus /n/n. Okay, so now if we were to rerun this again, you'll see what, oh, list to string. Okay, we need to say str, just like this. Now this should work. So now you'll see file type exe and then file type PDF. So let's do this one more time just so I can show you kind of the finished product here. So we move into our downloads, move back into our downloads, and let's run this script one more time and you can really see what's happening. So we do this. Here's all of our exe files, so file type.exe, and then file type.pdf. Here's all of our PDF files. And everything got moved without a hitch. And you'll see in our downloads folder, boom, all of our exe files are right there. And then boom, all of our PDF files are right there. And I just opened up a PDF file about John Locke. I don't know what that was from. That was from a long time ago. So that's the script at its most basic form. It's pretty easy. It's not super difficult. For loops can be a little bit difficult to understand sometimes, but if you think about it, just saying in this specific application, it can be pretty easy because you just say, you can read it almost literally. You say for every single file within the downloads files list, we're going to perform this specific operation. So that's pretty much the best way to think about it in Python. In JavaScript, if you want to do the same thing, you type for let I equals 0, I is less than downloads files dot length, and then I plus plus, and then I would be referencing file instead. So it would be file, and file. And that would be the same thing. So isn't this so much more readable than that? So JavaScript is a little bit more difficult in terms of its syntax for understanding for loops, but Python makes it pretty easy for us. And then lists are just pretty self-explanatory. Lists are just lists of things, and we can loop through those lists using our for loops, and that's what makes this program really fun to do, because it gives you a great application to understand for loops and lists within the context of organizing our file system. So that's pretty much the program. If you want to do more stuff with it, you can, and I'll give you a couple ideas for that as well. This Python script is a lot of fun to do, and it's a really great program for just getting started, but there's also a lot more you can do with it when it comes to adding functionality and some extra stuff. And there's one major problem that this program actually has, and that is dealing with duplicate files. So let's set up a real-world situation here. Let's say a month ago you downloaded the Spotify setup installer, and you ran the script and you organized all your files, so all of your exes are in here. And then you come back a month later and you have uninstalled Spotify, so you need to reinstall it. So you grab the installer again and you re-download it into your downloads folder, and you haven't sorted it yet, so it's just in your downloads folder, not in your exe folder. So you have two things named the exact same thing, just in different locations. And that's okay within Windows File Explorer, that's fine, but they can't be in the same folder together. So when we try and run our script, we're trying to move Spotify Setup into the exe folder with something that's already named Spotify Setup. They're named the exact same thing, and we can't do that. So I'll show you in Python, if we try and sort our exes, it's going to give us an error. It's going to say Spotify Setup already exists. So the goal is then to rename that file before it gets moved and then move it in. So it would be to rename it something like this, right? And then we'd run it, and then it would get moved in. That's kind of the goal. So let me show you actually a script that I made that actually does that for us. And it can be kind of a jumping off point for you to kind of do the same thing. This script right here, which I've added some other functionality in there as well, but this script will indeed fix that. So I'm actually going to, I just want to do installer files. So we're going to comment out the rest of these. And we're just going to do installer files. So if I run this script, you'll see it has listed off all of the MSI and .exe, right? And so it creates this exception down here. When we get to Spotify Setup, the file, Spotify Setup.exe, is already in your destination folder. File was renamed Spotify Setup 1.exe. And so now, if we go into exe files, you will see we have Spotify Setup and Spotify Setup 1. That's just one example of an add-on that will make your program a little bit more versatile, and just overall a bit more fleshed out. So, and then also another idea for you to try is adding like a summary at the end. So it says sort the installer files true. So we did in fact sort those, and the number of files we sorted was 92. And that's just a really easy implementation. But this can actually get really big. So if we want to do our entire downloads folder and all the specific file types using this setup, and we run this, you'll see it lists off all the files for exes, PDFs, audio, video, office, image, zip, and then it'll tell us the summaries at the bottom. And obviously we just sorted it, so there's no more files to sort. So that's why I didn't return anything, because you'll see our downloads is now super clean, super organized. We've got our zip files over here, we got our PDFs over here, everything's super organized. So yeah, that's pretty much the programming side of things, and hopefully that gives you some good ideas for expansion on the project.